r/ask Reddit. What is your oh shit? I've got to get the hell out of here right now. Story? I was solo camping in the woods during a phase where I wanted to be a survival expert. I hiked out, miles from any roads or building, built a shelter and then hiked back the way I came. Less than a mile away from my camp, I found a dead coyote, decapitated, gutted, and laid out like a sacrifice or something. The eyes were gouged out and it was strung across a big, flat rock, a rock which I used as a marker on the way in. So I know it hadn't been there a day before. I ran out of there as fast as I could, knife at the ready, probably 10 miles back to my house. I still have no idea who would have done it, but I know I didn't want to run into them in the woods alone. Sounds like that day you were a survival expert. I was leaving for work at 5:30 am. While it was still dark, I locked the inside door handle and walked out the door, pulling the door closed behind me. As I turned around to walk off the porch toward my car, I saw 4 men jump out of the van and start coming toward me. The street was otherwise empty. My heart was pounding and I felt panic start as I was digging in my big, messy purse for my keys to unlock the door and get back in my house. The whole time, I'm just thinking they are going to grab me, shove me in the van, and rape kill me. I was able to get back in my house before they made it to me, but it scared the shit out of me. Turns out they were immigrations officers looking for someone who used to live in our house, and that is standard practice for them if they think the suspect will run. A 500-pound hog got loose at the state fair and started charging right at me. I've never run so fast in my life. People think pigs are cute or silly, but a mother so can remove limbs. My friend and I met at Waffle House for lunch. A guy came into the restaurant looking for a piece of paper that he had accidentally left on a table. The waitress didn't know where the paper was located and might have thrown it away. The guy got upset saying the paper was important and he was going home to get his gun stored under his mattress. My friend and I quickly paid our check and got the heck out of the restaurant. Yep, that's Waffle House. When I was in high school, early 80s, I saw a lot of heavy metal bands. I had a friend who could always get us backstage after the show. So Anvil played and we went backstage. All of a sudden the lead singer said, "Okay, all the girls take off your clothes or get out." I got out. The rest of the girls stayed. That sweet moment you realize you mean absolutely nothing to the people you just paid money to support. I worked for an agency that helps people do their daily tasks for home health care. I had a man whose insurance prohibited personal care, like a shower. He was very upset during my visit when I declined his request for bathing. I felt bad at first, but soon the man became very angry with me. He accused me of all kinds of things and started pacing around room to room like he was looking for something. But between that and his spit-yelling rage, I slipped out of the house and drove to a safer place. I reported the incident to my employer and later found out that this person is a sex offender who had previously raped another woman. Who knows what he was planning that day? Maybe nothing, but I'm glad I left. Edit. Sorry if this will be bad formatting. Thank you for the awards. I am sad to hear about similar situations being shared. Always trust your instinct. A lot of people that I see are very physically capable but have difficulties in other areas of their lives. This was the only person I ever saw with this particular insurance and the only time I've ever seen personal care prohibited. The agency should have revealed that you were going to a known sex offender's house. WTF. I was driving north on I-65 in the middle of Indiana. The sky was getting dark. The wind was picking up. It started hailing. I turned on the radio to hear that a tornado was nearby. I determined it was behind me going from SW to NE and about to cross over the interstate. Other cars were driving slow or pulling over because of the rain and hail. I was hauling ass to get away from there. I go through a tornado video binge every couple years, and recently learned that sometimes the tornado will just blend in with the other clouds or darkness such that you might not even know you're driving towards one. So scary to realize that you cannot even know it's right in front of you. I was on a restaurant and they were using a propane tank to power an outdoors heater. Suddenly the tank started to catch fire and I got out quickly because I thought it was going to explode. The staff turned the tank off and everyone laughed at me for overreacting, but damn, I got scared, lol. I lived in South Everett, WA for a couple years. Was walking home from the bus stop to my apartment, which took me behind the Home Depot. Suddenly a van starts following me. I hear the side door slide open and look behind me to see a man with the top half of his body hanging out the slider door looking at me. I took off running towards my apartment, literally running as far as I could. The van started going faster. By chance a guy was pulling out of the driveway of my apartment complex, sees me running for my life, and stops. The van immediately turns around and speeds off. Guy asks if I'm okay. I ask him to just stay there and please watch me walk into my apartment, which was the building next to his. He did. Thank God. I started carrying mace and a very large knife the next day. My ex-husband came into our bedroom where I was sleeping and screamed into my ear, "You and your mom need to stop playing mind games with me." Understand I didn't speak to him much to not set him off. He hadn't spoke to my mom in 3 months. Without looking at him I walked downstairs in the dark to sleep on the couch. As I was laying down a big ceramic lamp flew by my head and smashed against the wall. He followed me downstairs and I didn't hear him because the dogs came with me and their collars jingled loud enough I couldn't hear him. He'd been abusive, but after throwing a heavy lamp at my head in the dark I knew he'd kill me. I couldn't leave that night because he took my keys, but I ran away to a safe house as soon as he left the house. I was in Thailand back in 2010, on the southern islands after a full moon party. My friend and I were talking to 2 girls who invited us to play poker. We went and sat down with 2 German guys and 2 burly Thai guys full of tattoos and began to play. They were joking, friendly, and the buy-in was $10. We lost some pots, won some pots, and overall it was a happy experience. The Thai guys beat us and on the last hand I managed to claw my chips back to about $8. My friend was looking tired so I gave him the nod. I thanked for the game and I said we would cash out and we would be on our way. The Thai guys put a machete on the table and told us to duck off. My friend, myself and the 2 German guys noped out of that situation as fast as we could. On the way back the girls caught up with us and apologized, but it meant duck all because they were clearly in on the take. Lesson learned: if pretty girls ask you to play a game, it's for nefarious reasons. When I was 17 I met with a 23-year-old guy for a mall date. Can't remember his name for the life of me. I had just gotten out of a horrible relationship and was trying to distract myself. We had dinner and when the waiter brought the check, the guy told me he had forgotten his wallet in his car and that if I went with him he could grab it. I told him it was fine and paid for the meal myself. We went into a couple shops, but he kept asking me questions about my ex-boyfriend. Also he mentioned that he had been in jail but wouldn't tell me what for, and I was nervous. Then things came to a head when he kept saying, "Hey, just come to my car for a second please, let's listen to music," and kept getting increasingly anxious every time I declined. I was so scared. I immediately pretended to have a period emergency so I could get out of there, and luckily I had parked in a different lot than he did. I still have no idea what his intentions were, but man, that was terrifying. My husband and I were heading out of town. We saw a guy on the side of the highway pacing under the overpass. I asked my husband to take the exit and go over the overpass and take the next exit to continue on the highway. The second we took the exit the guy jumped in front of a semi and killed himself. He was a freshman in college. The semi driver was 72 years old and 3 weeks away from retiring. I cannot imagine what the driver is going through. I was walking to my house from my ex-house very early in the morning when I saw this little girl with a backpack running for her life from 2 big street dogs. At that moment I didn't think and I ran towards the dogs and missed a kick. The 2 dogs came after me, biting my legs and arm. They were out of control and these were like the longest 5 minutes of my life. I couldn't stop them from biting me. The little girl kept running until I didn't see her anymore. It was just me and the dogs attacking me. I tried to climb a fence to get inside a house but I couldn't when a taxi driver stopped and went out of the car with a short stick and he tried to scare them off, giving me a chance to run in without thinking. I got inside the car. The guy just ran a couple of times around the car with the dogs behind until he got in and he drove off like really fast. He took me to the hospital where I got a lot of stitches on my legs, arms and hands. That guy is my hero. Every now and then I go to his taxi stop and give them sandwiches or something. We never knew what happened to those dogs. Was waiting for the next bus in a bus station at 2 AM in Minneapolis. A security guard outside told me to stay within the camera zone. I sat down and waited, all alone except a couple of junkies in another part of the station. Suddenly a guy comes in and walks up to me. This guy dressed in a black hoodie wearing a skeleton mask stood right in front of me. He didn't say a word, just stood there and looked at me. When he started to walk away I bolted out of there, ran down the street and luckily found a 24/7 Walgreens. Ripped my pants while bowling. Incidentally, I was also going commando, and the meats and cheeses were fully exposed. I bowled a frame or two before noticing too. It was a second date, man face palming. This story just got worse as it went on. Oh god. I was the only white guy working at a Hispanic restaurant and I don't speak Spanish, that's part of it. One night after work I get invited to drink at one of their houses. All is going good with drinking and I even danced a bit. Then after going outside to the back patio to smoke a cigarette I come back inside and the guy whose house I was at has a knife and is yelling at these 3 co-workers of mine blocking the front door yelling in Spanish that no one is leaving. I knew that much. A bar patron who knew me grabbed me and pleaded to the guy just to let me and him out since we had no part in it. The homeowner lets us both out. I ask the bar patron WTF was that when we're outside since I can't speak Spanish and he says the guy thinks my 3 co-workers are sleeping with his wife and he's probably about to kill them. I got in my car and got the F out of there. Was sleeping at a friend's house. Went to the kitchen to get some water. Her father hugged me from behind. I was 14, I guess. Never went to their house again. I was living in France on my own and I got a tutoring client. A man wanted me to teach his young daughter. First session he offers to drive me home. Spends the entire time asking about a boyfriend, where I live, etc. Second session he wants to give me a tour of his house. I noticed he was standing in the door when we went into a room. Once we got to the second floor, I grabbed his daughter so nothing would happen. After that I tried to quit and he guilted me into coming 3 more times. Every time I got so anxious beforehand I wanted to puke. Every time he would offer a ride and I took the 2 hours of buses home instead. Finally I fully broke it off. I knew something bad was going to happen to me and confirmed it with a few other young English speaking women I knew. He was recruiting at best his second wife, but they all got extremely bad feelings being alone with him. In high school I went to a party in a recently abandoned house on the outskirts of town. There were a lot of people I knew there but also a lot of shady folks I was unfamiliar with. Things started out okay, or at least as okay as they can for a party with a bunch of liquored up teenagers. As the night wore on people started destroying things. I guess just because the place was abandoned. I left when someone threw a toilet out of an upstairs window. I found out later that the cops showed up. Several people ran from them through a nearby cornfield but were caught. A friend of mine ran right into a barbed wire fence however and ended up in the hospital. I was in Paris with my family, on holiday. We were walking down the Champs-Élysées when we noticed that the road was suddenly lined either side with riot police. We quickly got off the road, behind the line of police, and ducked into some showroom whilst some protesters of some kind then had a mini riot with the police. I don't remember much as my parents probably tried to keep me away from the windows so that I wouldn't be able to see or even end up in any sort of danger. New Year's Eve party in high school. No adults and a bunch of rough-ish guys and one very petite young woman. She got a hold of a bottle that was basically half vodka and half orange juice and chugged it. I got the sense things may not end up well for her given some of the comments the guys were making. And these were not my friends. People I barely knew or trusted. I got her out of there and gave her a ride home. Feel like that could have ended up very bad if things had played out just a bit different. I am in the shower in a hotel and the fire alarm goes off. I was on my honeymoon. So I quickly get dressed and my wife and I run down 7 flights of stairs. We open the door and exit and see the staff just chilling. They see we are a little concerned and tell us that it was just a drill for staff only and that there was a sheet of paper near the elevator explaining this. So maybe it was my fault or maybe they could have been a little better at communicating. Either way it scared the shit out of me. They sort of laughed like oh, poor things. I was hungover as shit and not really that happy but I brushed it off. Haha. I was in early high school and for an easy high school job I did some yard work for some of my neighbors. There was one older guy 2 doors down who asked me to pull weeds. We'd eat his backyard fence and push mow the yard. I finished this and was told to come back that evening so he could get cash to pay me. So far you may be wondering why I'm posting this here, but it gets weirder. I went over later and he had clearly been drinking, and I had to listen to him for 15 minutes while he looked for the cash he supposedly just got. Then he kept getting closer to me and he asked me to come down to his man cave to help set up his Wii and that he'd pay me a little more. I grabbed the cash and hightailed it out of there and never spoke to him again. I have never been more creeped out by another human being. This isn't going to be as dramatic as most other stories, but I was no older than 10 at this time, so cut me some slack. It was Halloween and I was either Miley Cyrus, not too proud of this, or a pink Power Ranger, but there's a house in our neighborhood that always had a guy sitting on his driveway with a chainsaw. It doesn't have a chainsaw, it can't actually cut things, but it still revs like a chainsaw does. We're walking up to his house and being the forgetful child I completely forgot that the person sitting there was alive. I walked up to the bowl and told the normal looking person trick or treat and she put my candy in my bag. I went to back up and Chainsaw Man stood up and turned it on, and within 30 seconds I was at the other end of the street. I have never ran faster than I ran that day, and for that one moment in time every bit of clumsiness in my body disappeared. This was 10 years ago and Chainsaw Guy still does this. Working as a hospital housekeeper, the other housekeepers invited me to sit with them in the hospital cafeteria. They told me essentially if I see anything to not be a snitch. So is this like a Cynthia over there is sneaking out meds for her immunocompromised mother who couldn't afford treatment otherwise thing, or a when it gets dark we tie strings to the coma patient's wrists and ankles and use them as giant marionette puppets thing. I was in downtown NYC a couple of blocks away from the WTC gawking at a fire. There were tons of people milling around watching. They had blocked off some streets, and I asked a cop how I could get around to where I needed to go further downtown. He told me which streets were closed, but that they might expand it, so I should get moving. The conversation was pretty casual. As I started walking away I looked back, and he had his radio to his ear, and whatever he heard, he panicked, went as white as a ghost, and started yelling for people to move further back. I turned around and jogged the hell out of there and made it to the Brooklyn Bridge before the first tower came down. So while living in the deep south you occasionally meet some real shitheads. Some drug addicts down the road stole a rifle from a buddy of mine, and this was the last straw as they had harassed a number of people living in the area including my parents. They were constantly stealing stuff from our shed and threatened my folks for money. They lived in a secluded area with lots of trees off a dirt road. It wasn't their property, so just being there was probably illegal. We lived out in the middle of nowhere, so you really don't see police come out that way. It's all farmland and dirt roads. I snuck out there one night to take back my bud's rifle. Definitely saw some illegal shit like weapons, a meth lab, a puppy breeding room, etc. When I went there, found his rifle and got out. When I was heading back I heard their vehicle coming down the road and had to lay low in some bushes. I could have swore they spotted me, but they actually drove right past. I was honestly ready to get that rifle ready if they were going to come after me. Thankfully I got out of there without being seen. They did notice the rifle was gone and came looking for it, but I had hidden it for a few days before returning it to my friend, so they can't really accuse him. I was in Guadeloupe in the Caribbean. Some deranged mf had a rifle and was firing in the air above people's heads in an open market. Me and my buddy were the only white dudes there. I felt like we had a target on our backs, slid into a car and stayed there for 15 minutes. My dumb friends were climbing the roof of the elementary school near our homes. I decided I would vibe on the swings for the day and not participate in climbing the roof that day. I just didn't feel like it. And once I saw the janitor on the phone in the hallway I thought now would be a good time to leave. I am the only African American kid in the group and did not feel like getting in trouble with the police, even if I did nothing wrong. I shouted to them that I was gonna go and that I saw the janitor on the phone and she could potentially be calling the cops. They called me a few names, and right as I was leaving a cop car pulled into the parking lot, so I went around the other side of the school, narrowly escaping. Too long didn't read. Friends climbed the roof at Elam School. Didn't want to get in trouble with the police, so I left. When my buddies were in college we went to a frat party and were rolling pretty hard on MDMA. Everything was going as good as a random frat party can go until I hear a window shatter. Some jerk off smashed the neighbor's window and I went to find my butt since I knew the cops were on their way. We ran like hell away from that house and saw the cops rolling up to the house like 30 seconds after we got a few houses down. Glad I found them as quickly as I did. Didn't want to be rolling my ass off talking to the cops. Was a good night. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.